Sometimes you see, I don't know if you see these things on like TikTok or anything, but you see families who have like their corporate meeting at the beginning of the year, or they actually turn it into a business planning meeting for like their family.
No.
But they do. It looks incredible to me. I'd love to do it.
Welcome back to Money Talks Life Lessons. I'm your co-host, Joanne Kaban, and I am joined here today with my fabulous business partner and co-host, Melissa McGuire.
Hello.
So really excited for today's episode. We are talking about what happens when one partner handles all the money in a household.
Surprisingly, this happens all the time.
It might even be happening in my household right now. So let's get into it.
Okay. So, oftentimes when it comes to this, we see that this happens once it stops working. But I think probably for the purpose of this discussion today, we should probably talk about it from the beginning to end because we usually only just see it in the end.
Yeah.
Right? So let's talk about why so many couples fall into this pattern where one person winds up handling all the finances.
I think historically, it was very much so a male-dominated role in the household.
Okay.
For many years, I don't know what generation we want to call it, that responsibility usually fell to the man of the household. Do you disagree with me?
I do, a bit. I feel like it was the man's responsibility to make the money and then hand over the paycheck to the wife, who did all of the household finances. But then anything fancy after that, the man did. The man had the bank account. The man could get the lending. The man could get the credit card. The man could do the investing. And all the wife could do was the household finances.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely in the bookkeeping side of things, but I think a lot of the control definitely went to one gender.
Yeah.
So I guess historically, the role has kind of been collaborative to some extent, but there usually is one driving person.
Yeah. So like when I'm thinking about managing household finances, it's like, the husband being like, here, dear, you can now figure out how to feed us and the kids and pay the bills because that's all you get to do. And then I'm going to do all the other stuff, right? Like it was more of a like household burden that was applied to the stay-at-home mom, at least for the generation, the way I'm thinking of the generation.
Right.
So, and then anything else, yes, definitely. It was still all within the other partner's control, I think, but just sort of allotted differently. So you'd see a lot of people now, or what we would see things as they start to break down, who don't know how to manage the everyday finances, but could tell you a lot about their investing.
Right.
So like one person knows a lot about investing, but can't figure out how to pay a bill.
Exactly.
So I think we see a lot of that.
Yeah, and why do you think that is? Why do you think that a lot of couples kind of fall into one person doing the majority of the finances versus splitting the job?
I don't exactly know the answer to that. It could be that one person's just naturally better at it, has more of affinity for numbers, enjoys it, doesn't feel the burden of other things in the house that might feel burdenful. It might bring them joy to do that. Right. And if that's the case and it doesn't bring the other person joy and it's actually work for the other person, well, then it's a really easy transition. The difficulty in there, though, is that even though one person experiences a lot of joy in doing something like this, that other person needs to still know what's going on. And because they don't, that's probably why the joy isn't there. Right?
And I guess that's huge. Knowledge, right? Is, I guess, from a practical standpoint, and I think about this from like our business, right, on efficiency, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for both of us to be paying the power bill, right? Like we need to split up who's doing what, who's managing the staff, who's managing the office. Like we have to have those discussions. So I guess within a household and a family as well, we're not going to have two people doing the exact same job. Otherwise, bills are going to get overpaid.
Right. But from a business perspective,
yeah,
we each know how to do the other jobs.
Exactly.
Like we have to in case the other's not there to do it.
Exactly.
Right? So maybe it's less, sometimes you see, I don't know if you see these things on like TikTok or anything, but you see families who have like their corporate meeting at the beginning of the year, or they actually turn it into a business planning meeting for like their family. I don't know why I just used quotes here, but they do. It looks incredible to me. I'd love to do it, but it's all like we would normally do for business planning for a family, complete with KPIs and all of this stuff to how to make the family work like an office would work. Now, those are for the people that really enjoy that kind of stuff, right? So not everybody does, but then everybody would know exactly what's going on, right? So it'd be kind of fun if we could, turn our family lives into that, but not many people are going to be happy to do that.
Sorry, family, because I feel like this is coming soon to a living room near you. Key performance results. I don't know. Jonathan's going to be calling Melissa after this saying, what did you tell my wife to do?
If I tried to be like, all right, Doug, here is your key performance indicator thing. Like, here you go. He'd be like, no. He might have some other choice words, but he would not allow me to do that.
And I think, just to kind of pull it back into, why we kind of see one person kind of take that lead in the relationship, I think it is just a natural interest, like you talked about, right? Like for us, like we do this for a living. So it makes a lot of sense that we would, like in my situation, like I take a lead on all of our finances because that's just the nature of what I do. Like I've got my budget, we know we have our financial plan, and I kind of earmark everything. My husband does know like what we're doing and why we're doing it, but in terms of the actual execution of it, that does fall onto my shoulders.
Right. As we go through this conversation, we're also going to have to acknowledge that sometimes it's there might be like a faith-based component to this or a cultural component to this,
right? In
terms of how the finances are taken care of in the home. So if we're speaking from our own experiences and what we see based off of our own experiences, our own sort of cultural experiences, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that there are other cultural ways that do things a little bit differently than what you and I would do in our own homes. Just saying that it's something that we probably should consider.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, that's a really excellent point that you just talked about, because we might see in our day-to-days that it's we kind of want both people to be involved, or sometimes we talk about like there might be somebody who is more controlling in the relationship, and it's easy to maybe to just blanket somebody as that, but there's a lot of different influences and different situations and circumstances that we need to recognize as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of kind of like potential issues with just having one person be the default CFO, right? So of the family, we don't normally have problems to start, as you kind of mentioned, but they do develop down the road.
Yeah. And there might be times where there's problems to start. Like there might be the beginning of a life together friction because everyone's managed their own stuff, like until you get together with somebody, right? And then it might be that the default of working through that is one person says, okay, yeah, you've got a better idea. You could go ahead. And then the person with the better idea sort of takes over, right? Like I think if I think about my own relationship, there's definitely friction to start over who was going to do the stuff because we didn't have the same plan in mind, right? So we tried it one way, it didn't work, we went back to another way. So I think sometimes it could start with a little bit of friction, and then sometimes it's just somebody has a better plan that seems to be, or somebody just sort of bows out of the plan and just says, okay, fine, this is obviously really important to you.
A merging of the priorities, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So what about those partners that just are not interested, or they get overwhelmed with finances? Like we see that a lot of time with clients, right? We usually have a couple in our boardroom, and we work really hard at encouraging the uninterested spouse to be in the room,
right? Because
there's a lot of times where they would rather just be at home, be in the garden, doing something that they enjoy, rather than coming and hearing about numbers, right? But why is it important to have everybody in the room, and why do you think, I guess it's a two-part question, there are people that are just uninterested or get overwhelmed?
Well, I think it's important to have two people in the room as much as we can. I do think that finances should be transparent in a family, right? And if you've made a goal to get to a certain point in your life, then people need to work together to make that goal happen. And it's sort of a reckoning of making sure that goal is happening, right? So it's sort of a following up on sort of the plans you set for yourself. So I always think it's important that both people are there. As to like why I think one person might get overwhelmed with the finances and sort of bow out of that, I think sometimes it just can be a distribution of what happens in the house, right? Like in terms of the responsibilities in the house. And it might just be that some responsibilities that one person has seem really overwhelming to them already, right? Like there's a lot for them to think about, and they don't want to be like, oh God, I want to think about the money now. Like it speaking for my own family, even now, so we've always had a very specific way of doing things, and we've recently just changed them. So like on when it's time to pay our bills and do all of our stuff, I am actually not the one who does it anymore. And I used to for the longest time. But I have a lot going on right now, a lot to think about, and I just didn't want that in my brain. And so we talk about it. I'm just not the one who does it anymore. Right. So it's a shifting of who has the mental capability to do it.
The capacity.
Right? And I don't have that right now. So we still have our regular, meetings of our budgets and all that sort of stuff, right? We do that, but it's not me always being the proponent on it. I've shifted that over to Doug for a little bit until I have the capacity to come back to it. So I think sometimes that's just what happens. Mm-hmm. But if you have both parties of a couple willing to sort of take over or have the ability to take over, it gives so much freedom to the other person, right? Because you don't always have to manage it. And what if that you are the one that has so much joy in doing it, and then suddenly one day there's no more joy, right? For whatever reason, it's just suddenly not fun anymore.
I feel it's important that both parties are aware of the goals.
Yeah.
And what it takes to get there. Like what the means are to get to that end, right? It's so easy to say, hey, I want to retire at 60 years old and I want to go on X amount of trips every year. But what does it actually take to get there? And usually by having both people in front of you and we're all collaborating together, you get the buy-in more, right? Because I often get, we'll sometimes have couples that come in without the other one and say, well, oh, shoot, I got to take more money out instead of putting money in because my spouse wants to go on another vacation, right? And there's a form of contention between, what one spouse might feel is a priority versus the other.
Right.
And it's not to anybody's fault. It's just a different point of view, right? Like one wanted to live in the present. The other one wasn't realizing what it did to the longer term plan. And so it's kind of like merging both of those priorities, right? And like from a longer term planning side of things, I'm not, saying don't go on any vacations. What I'm saying is let's map everything out collectively so that we all know where we're putting our priorities, right?
Exactly. It's like what we've talked about before about how you and I both we have like a dollar figure spend limit before we check in with our partners because we have a goal to get to and we don't want to derail that. But if we're possibly going to go outside of the, what we've set for each other, we talk to each other first. Not you and I, but you with Jonathan and me with Doug. We talk about our thing first before we go ahead and do it. To me, that's collaborative finances. And when we talk about getting to a goal or doing something or a reckoning of the plan, we might have different viewpoints of what money means for us or what retirement is going to mean for us, but we know that we've got the same collective goal and we can go in together and see, and we know what the deviation from the plan would look like.
So, we kind of set the stage with saying, what happens when one partner deals with the finances? Like, we haven't really got into a lot of the issues of it yet.
Right.
But do you actually think that's a problem or can it work?
I think it can work until it doesn't, right? Like there's always until it doesn't, right? Lots of people can be really happy in terms of how it is that they're doing it because that's what works for their family or something to that effect. But like how many times have we seen one member of a couple pass away and then the other person be completely lost, right? Doesn't know how or even have a credit card. Doesn't know how or even know what to do to think about in terms of the investments, doesn't know how to manage day-to-day finances. And it's not because their system didn't work. And from an outside, like our perspective, we'd look at that and be like, we really wish you had paid attention or were interested in it prior to. But maybe this is just a situation for them that felt really good. But it doesn't work afterward. And then you have to try to figure it out.
Right. And I think that we've been seeing a huge shift in I'm gonna just go based on what we started the conversation off of. The female older generations are really starting to take a seat at the table more and wanting to learn more when that initially wasn't their role, like especially when it comes to investing, right? Right. Because you think about it, even if you have excellent communication, like you didn't come to the meetings, but the other spouse came home and was like, I had a great meeting with our advisor. We talked about this, we got retirement plan. We're doing all the things. If that partner then is no longer here because they pass away, and that other spouse, we've had a few situations where a widowed spouse came into our office and their understanding of investing is not at the same level as what they were doing prior to the more interested spouse, like who was actually doing the investing on behalf of the family. And that actually can play a huge role in potential issues to the plan. Yep. Right? Because if we get somebody, we had a couple, we were planning on investments, they needed to make 5%, they needed to have some sort of exposure to the stock market. And now the new spouse has no idea about how to invest. And they're uncertain about the markets, what it means, what it takes to invest. And they decide, what, I want to put it in a mattress. That's going to derail all the plan that we've been working towards, right? And so that could actually really impact like their future situation because they just weren't brought along for that journey.
And let's not forget the perception difference too. And by perception, I mean like if we have two different people in the same room hearing the same thing, they're each going to hear it differently, right? And True. If we have both people in the room to hear the thing, they're going to hear it differently, then they have opportunities to ask questions. Where if the one person hears it, brings it home, says all the stuff, we got to really hope that this person has like heard everything right.
It's like the telephone game.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't even tell you how many times I have to say to my husband, okay, repeat word for word what was said. He's like, I don't know. I don't even know. I'm like, oh, okay, that did not work.
So I was kind of talking a little bit about some of the cracks that do show up when, there's one person that deals with the finances. You talked about someone passing away. What are some other issues like around credit? I know this is a big one.
Yeah. And I feel like all of the situations that we're going to bring up are like tough ones, really tough ones. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be something as large as these that breaks the system. It can be just the tiniest little thing that turns into something bigger. But like credit can be a really big deal. Credit can get really out of control for somebody. And if somebody doesn't have the right... Like if something has been missed, a payment was missed, or something was like slipped, or maybe credit's used more often than the other person thought and becomes a snowball issue, right? That can cause like dire consequences for a family and for a goal if one person suddenly isn't doing well with it and then hiding it and all the stuff. So those are pretty drastic situations, but they do happen.
Right. And that's why it's important, for both spouses to be in the loop on that because, there's so many situations we've seen where one spouse, because they don't really know how much, what's going on financially, they think they have more money than what they do.
Exactly.
And then they go and they buy more things. They go on the vacations and they actually don't realize because they're not involved in the finances and seeing that big picture at times.
Exactly.
So it's not maybe, trying to proactively put the family in a bad position. It's just they don't know. They're not. Right. They don't have their finger on the button. Right. They don't know.
I went straight to the nefarious part of it, but yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, and I mean, if we think about establishing credit too, right? Like I learned this when I was first married. Is I actually never had any like credit for the longest time because everything was in my husband's name. Right? I didn't have a credit card. I had nothing. I got a secondary card on his credit card. And we had a joint bank account. Like I think I had my original kid bank account from forever, right? That used to be mine. But I didn't have any of my own credit because I just paid for things with cash always. Okay. So that was something that we had to proactively do was say, okay, like, I need to get my own credit card. And so I had to start and build up the credit. And this is something that we see quite a bit with clients where there was one spouse that had all the credit, was the main, income provider. And that happens with stay-at-home parents, right? The other person doesn't necessarily able to actually get credit sometimes because they don't have that reportable income.
Right.
So it's just something that we need to be conscious of. And we often will talk to clients and say, okay, like, do you have a credit card in your name? It doesn't have to be huge, but just use it and pay it off so that you have a credit history. Because if a spouse of yours passes away, and let's just say you need a line of credit, you need this, it's good to have that history.
Right. So you're not taking away the opportunity before you realize it's something you need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's so easy to miss, right? Because it's like, well, I don't really need it. We pay it with cash every month. Like, why do I need credit, right? But we're in such a world where even getting you need credit. And sometimes, as we talked about in other episodes, it's strategic. So why limit ourselves?
Exactly.
So what does the non-involved partner typically not know? Or what should they know about the financial situation if they're not interested? So we had our listeners today and they're like, okay, I've been the primary. I need my spouse to listen to this because I need to get them involved.
Right.
What are they missing out on?
Kind of everything. They're missing out on sort of the budgeted idea. They're missing out on, as you say, the ability to make or break a goal, because maybe they don't realize they're breaking a goal when they're trying to make it. They might not realize there's debt kicking around that needs to be taken care of. They might not realize that they're like 2 steps away from the really cool thing, which makes it like sort of incentivizes to keep doing the thing. They might not realize they're 2 steps away from total disaster. So it would be, to me, if somebody needed to sort of know what to know. Oh, it's such a hard question to answer because, I mean, if the non-involved partner typically doesn't know really much about anything, they just think it's okay. Are we meeting our plan? Are we doing a thing? Yep, good.
I got groceries in the fridge.
Exactly. I can
got
use my credit card. Yeah. So they're good. But I think they definitely don't know what they don't know. And it should be sort of started in baby steps.
Yeah. And I would be so worried for them. Like if, there was a divorce situation. I mean, I guess I'm going right down that dark road. But if there's one person controlling the finances and you're going through a divorce, you might not even know what assets are there.
Yeah.
How much debt there really is. Like that, there's a big discovery during that stage. And you might be in a completely different situation and lifestyle that you never saw coming.
Yeah. So it is a protectionary measure for sure to have an idea of what's going on. And I think for you and I, because we've seen everything, it's, to us, it makes perfect sense that everybody knows all the stuff.
Exactly.
Right? Because we've seen it go wrong so many times. So to us, I think if we see all parts of the puzzle, we're like, okay, I feel good. I know I have a contingency plan. I have this plan. I have that plan, right? Just because of what we've seen, we know how important that is. It's tough to convey that information to somebody who's not in it until they're in it.
Yeah, and this actually sparks like a pain point I always see. Like think about us in our job. Like I go see an accountant and a lawyer at times, and I find myself nowadays, and maybe this is just the people I've been seeing, where I have to leave and drive most of the conversation, most of the questions.
Right.
And I'm in a financial related industry with a ton of schooling, that this is my profession. And I find I have to drive a lot of the dialogue and ask the questions to make sure that I'm capturing everything.
Right.
And so that can be a big issue because if you have somebody who has not had any exposure to finances or anything like that, they need to go and negotiate and figure out what questions to ask. Where do you even start? They, like you said, they don't know what they don't know. And in a world where, you kind of have to advocate for yourself a lot of the times, I find that can be really, really challenging if you don't even know where to start or what's out there.
And I find too that in a conversation with one of these professionals, maybe, I think this is a bone of contention for the both of us when this happens, is that this professional will automatically just talk to the person who's asking the questions, right? And I know that, like when my husband and I would go into like a bank meeting or something to that effect, he basically just defers all questions to me, right? And they'll ask him something and he'll just look at me and I'll answer it. But then I stopped answering. And I was like, well, so then I'll ask another question to make him answer, to bring him into the conversation, because he thinks they're talking to me. Like, even though they'll ask him a question, like they're really talking to me, so he doesn't even really care. Right.
Right.
So I know that you and I especially will make sure we target the questions to both people specifically to draw them into the conversation so that everybody's asking the questions. Everybody's like, participating
and
somehow.
feeling comfortable.
Exactly.
Right? Because sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, how do I go in and I ask this question?
Exactly.
And I don't want to, I mean, we had a whole series on asking dumb questions, I think. And it's like, there is no such thing as a dumb question. And the professional, if they're a good fit for you, should make you feel comfortable that you can do that.
And not just focus a conversation on one member of the couple.
Yeah. And they shouldn't make you feel smaller because you don't know something, because that's their profession. You have your own specialty.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know we talked a little bit about this in the beginning, and not every partner has to do everything, right? Because that's not efficient, right? We're all being pulled in so many directions. We all have our different roles, in, whether it's spoken or unspoken, in our family dynamics. What does a supportive dynamic look like?
I think it's as I alluded to before, like it comes down to communication, and it comes down to the ability for one person to pick up where the other person can't do it for that minute, right? So I would consider my dynamic to be extremely supportive, because I've said this is a lot for me right now. Can you do this? And the answer is yes. We're still talking about it, but he's doing it now, so that I can just take a minute and take a second. I come back to it. We ask questions. I still do a lot. I'm still involved in a lot and whatever. What I'm just not doing is hitting the buttons on the phone. Right? But I know all that's going on. I'm just not doing it. And that was always a me job before. Yeah. So I think a supportive partnership is one where the role or the job can ebb and flow as the other person has a capacity or not. But I do also think that it comes down to communication and ability to talk about it, to get on the same page as best you can and have an understanding of the whole situation.
Yeah, and I like what you said about the other person being able to step in and do it if something happens.
Right.
I mean, I think about my dynamic. I do most of it. I do most of the planning, but Jonathan's completely in the know of everything that's being done, and I consciously tell him, I'm like, I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing, so that he's aware.
Right.
And it's not because he's asking me to do it, because I think some days he would prefer if I didn't even tell him. But I'm like, no, you must know, so that I'm not a walking contradiction on this podcast.
Right.
But no, in all honesty, it's so important for him to know, because we just don't know what life's going to throw at us. And he would be able to, with some help, like he has got to go see Melissa probably, but be able to continue down that path, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny, because I'll hear Doug talking to his friends, or he'll tell me about these discussions he's had with his friends, because he's been listening to us this whole time, right? He's been listening to our podcasts. He edits them with me, like all this stuff. But he's not one of those people that doesn't talk about money, right? So he will talk about it with his friends. And I will hear him having like, he'll be asking questions like things like, oh, do you have life insurance? I have life insurance. Or, I save it to my tax-free savings account all this time. And really that savings into tax-free account was me saying, hey, we're going to put this now into your tax-free savings account. And he said, okay. But it is impactful to him. So he knows what's happening. He knows the importance. He might not be doing it all the time, but he's there. And then he's sharing, what he's doing with his friends. Who, maybe do the same, maybe don't do the same or whatever. But that always makes me kind of happy when I hear that he's talking about that with his friends. And he's got such a positive stance on talking about money now, instead of just keeping it all a shameful secret.
And I think that's huge, right? Like to be able to feel confident to have the discussions and to just share it within your community. And that's a big thing with the older generations, right? Is that was almost taboo at some point to like talk about money. So then how else do you learn? At least nowadays we have internet. There's so much more research. There's so much more transparency. And I think it's only going to get more. And so, people can be empowered to like start searching things, on their own and things like that. So I guess with that, saying that for anybody who's in kind of that, we have one driving partner in a relationship that is doing all the finances, what are some practical steps that people can do to like start shifting that balance?
I think the first step is just asking the questions, right? Like if I don't know, let's just say there's savings going on into a tax-free savings account. And then just asking why. Why are we doing that? Is there something else we could be doing? Why are we invested here? Is there something else we could be doing? I think just asking just the bare minimum questions opens up everything else, right? Piece by piece by piece. I mean, you could be saying things like, oh, let me see what our credit card statements look like. What does our bank balance look like? You could be doing those types of questions. I find that if you started with something like that, it can be quite overwhelming, or it can be really threatening to the person who's been working hard at doing this stuff the whole time, right? So then it sounds very much like, okay, now here's your reckoning. I demand to know what's going on. Instead of, hey, tell me about this. And then it seems to be a more free-flowing conversation.
Right.
I would hope in a situation where it's okay for, both people to know what's happening and one person's just chosen not to.
Mm-hmm. And I like the idea of just participating in these meetings.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like go to the accountant with, have both people go to the accountant. You don't necessarily need to understand the whole thing out of the gate, but you will pick up on little tidbits of information along the way. Just be present for all of those major financial decisions, just so that you're aware, you're kept in the loop, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if we think further to the questions of, how to bring somebody into the conversation, what questions should you be asking? If you're somebody who's just learning about the family finances, if we take it a step further, how often do you think that the partnership should be checking on the finances together?
I would say monthly is very important, right? People usually get paid at least every 2 weeks, once a month in some situations. It would be good to know what's happening when you get that influx of money and where it's going, right? Like you mentioned, a reckoning, it's kind of good to have some sort of accountability as to what happened in the last month.
Right.
I mean, some people might decide to do it, every 3 to 6 months, but I like the idea of couples being kept in the loop more. It's easier to digest. It's quicker to catch things that are going on if you need to make changes. It's just small little tweaks. And it allows the other individual who's normally not involved to just get on the same page in slower amounts.
I do still like our weekly check-ins that my husband and I have, but it's become like part of the fabric of our relationship. That if we went a whole month, I'd be like, well, what? Like we aren't talking to each other if that happens.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I think, again, it's just up to the family.
Exactly.
And what
I think it might be overwhelming for somebody who's just started to suddenly have to look at things like once a week. We've talked about how, we often will see one member of a partnership take over the finances. And we've talked about how the other person who's not doing it, it'd be good to start with small questions. Going forward and trying to be part of those meetings and ask a couple questions to get an idea of what's going on so that you're not left not knowing. These steps, they seem simple to us, right? But they're not so easy to start. And that's the tricky part. And that comes with a whole host of other different emotions and feelings. And yes, we did a whole podcast on feelings, right, when it comes to the finances, but it can be tricky to navigate through that.
Yeah, it can be really, really hard to have these conversations if you haven't been having them all along. Right?
Exactly. Yep.
So I guess the real question is why aren't you having the conversations? Is it mostly just because the other person is not interested? Is there a fear around finance? We've seen that before where people have had, negative things that have happened in their upbringing that has caused them to have kind of, I'm trying to find the right word here, but aversion to money, right? Is trying to find the root of why you're not being involved. Is it because it's just never been allowed? Right?
And that is something you have to recognize.
Exactly. And so whatever the dynamic it is really finding the root of that and then just baby steps into having the conversation. Just bring up, what's our net worth, look like? Like if we were to sit down and capture, we've got a house, what's the mortgage on it? Right? Just start with those conversations. Do we have any credit cards?
Right.
Like,
why
what's
do we
the
have
balance?
This credit card?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, is there any, often, I have this in my safe. I'm like, oh gosh, I still have 2 credit cards that have 0 balances on it that they're not even in our wallet, but why are they still active? Like, I should cancel these, right? It's just taking a full tally of everything that you have.
Right.
And just making it transparent. And I know we talk about this a lot, that we have a wealth map that does that with our clients, and we kind of put everything on one page and actually help lead that conversation for clients, right? But those are the types of things you could be doing in your own privacy of your home, right? So you can just be having those candid conversations.
If you can, absolutely.
Yeah, if you can. So Melissa, what's one thing that our couples should take away from this episode?
I would say that although it might seem easier now for one person to manage all the finances, it might seem like it brings one person a lot of joy. It might seem like a lot of somebody else has a lot, like they're at overcapacity and they just don't want to take that part on. They seem like it's a nice split in the household for that. I think hands down, we can say that there's always been a difficulty with this when the difficulty starts, right? And I think the one thing is, just as you said, start small. And when it comes to like the division of household stuff to do, the finances really shouldn't be there. The finances should be a joint effort. One person could do more, but the other person needs to know about it too.
Yeah. Transparency. It's to protect everybody that's involved, right?
Exactly. Well, to protect your goals and protect everything that you want, right?
I completely agree.
Thanks so much for watching and listening to this episode on what happens when one partner in a household manages all the finances. I think you could probably tell that this is a topic that Joanne and I both feel very strongly about. Even though we are the planners in our family, it is important that to us that everybody knows what's going on.
As always, please check out our socials, YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, and for all things Isle Wealth, please visit islewealth.ca.
Thanks so much.
Bye for now.
Corporate disclaimer. This podcast has been prepared by and with expressed opinions of Joanne Kaban and Melissa McGuire, and are not necessarily the opinions of Raymond James Ltd., RJL. Statistics, data, and other information presented are from sources RJL believes to be reliable, but their accuracy cannot be guaranteed. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of securities. Investors considering any investment should consult their investment advisor to ensure that it is suitable for the investor's circumstances and risk tolerance before making an investment decision. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Information provided in this podcast is general in nature and should not be construed as providing legal, accounting, and/or tax advice. Should viewers have any specific questions and/or issues in these areas, please consult a legal, tax, and/or accounting advisor. RJL is a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Raymond James USA Ltd. advisors may only conduct business with residents of the states and/or jurisdictions in which they are properly registered. Raymond James USA Limited is a member of FINRA and SIPC. We hope you enjoyed the podcast, and for more information, please visit islewealth.ca.